Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me today. Love to share my perspective here on water from GOA's perspective, Government of Alberta's perspective, and specifically from the Environment and Sustainable Resource Development, which is where I work. As was mentioned, I've spent a lot of time working on the water conversations. It was a provincial engagement that happened in the February, March, April timeframe there, and it was great to get out and speak to so many different people from all across the province, all the way from the south to the north, and we heard a lot of wonderful stories. We heard a lot of great facts, and most of all, there was a lot of passion that came with the stories for water within Alberta. So it was really wonderful. So what I'd like to do today is kind of share with you what we've learned through the water conversation, through some of the key themes that emerged out of the conversation, and kind of interweave that with the Government of Alberta's approach to resource management, which is their integrated resource management system. So, so it's the water conversation themes through the lens of integrated resource management system. So first I'll describe this government approach to managing our resources. So it's how Alberta strives to achieve the responsible resource stewardship, achieving environmental, social, and economic objectives for Alberta that Albertans expect for resource development. So the system incorporates management, conservation, and wise use of all resources, including energy, minerals, agriculture, forestry, land, air, water, climate, and diversity. So it's very all-encompassing. So we haven't always done things in a very integrated manner. Back in the 70s, when the department kind of came up, it was really about the management of pollutants. We've evolved, and then it became more about the management of the impacts of a single operation. So now we've evolved even more. It's about the management of the cumulative impacts of multiple contributors in an area. So this system is more of like a holistic, integrated approach in which we approach resource management. So this is the chart here, and I'll just spend a couple minutes kind of describing this system of how we think about environmental policies within the government. So it starts off at the 12 o'clock, the strategic intent there, and that really guides everything. What is the strategic intent for environmental development in an environmental way? So we look to our Government of Alberta's strategic plan that was developed for 2013-16. And within there, we see like 3 different focused agenda items. And so one is about families and communities. The other is about securing Alberta's economic future. But the one that's relevant for today's topic is advancing world leading resource stewardship. So that's about Alberta's natural resources being a source for jobs, economic development, and prosperity, but developing it in a really responsible way. So we move to the kind of 3 o'clock on the diagram, and it's about setting up outcomes and policies. So we look at the strategic intent and develop provincial policies that would be aligned with that, and develop plans in a regional perspective that would be in line with that as well. And we kind of move to the 6 o'clock on that diagram. It's policy assurance. So once those policies and plans are developed, there's a way to execute that and make it implementable. And where we see that coming about, and where you would see that is in the Alberta energy regulators. So they would be the ones who would assure that those policies and outcomes are there. And then kind of moving to that 9 o'clock on the diagram there is the performance evaluation and reporting. And that's all about monitoring and making sure we have the right performance indicators and monitoring systems in place. So you might see that manifest in the Alberta Energy Monitoring Evaluation Reporting Agency. So there was a recent bill that was actually introduced yesterday by our minister that created or stood up the organization. So we call it a MIRA. And that's to make sure that all the data and information will be open, accessible, transparent to all of Albertans. And where we see in the middle there is knowledge and information, and that flows through all of the components of what I've already discussed. So it's about, like, the knowledge is diverse, it's ever-changing, and it comes from various sources. So we take all of those in and consider them at every kind of angle in the whole system. And really, with that too, engagement is probably the most important part of this whole diagram. It's about building strong relationships and partners, and that enables the success of the whole system. So this would include early and meaningful engagement of all Albertans, partners, stakeholders, other governments, First Nation, and Métis as well. And in developing the outcomes and developing the policies and all the processes that come along with it as well. And all of this comes with the principle and the function of continuous improvement. So it's not a system that's static. We don't develop it and then kind of leave it alone and say that was good. But throughout the whole system, we're always looking to see, okay, are there ways to improve? Have we gone the wrong way? So if we have, let's shift course and shift any of these components of the system. So that's kind of the integrated resource management system, and it's a little bit kind of a model, but how we would see this kind of manifest itself in really concrete terms is integrated policy, regional planning, regulatory enhancement or the regulator, and the provincial monitoring agency, and Aboriginal engagement. So as I go through the themes that we've heard through the water conversation, I'll kind of try to speak to those in the context of these concrete components here. So we did have the water conversation, as I said, in February, March, April. It was the right time for it. The province is growing economically. The population is growing as well. And so there is a pressure on our water resources. There's demands for communities to meeting their goals, demands from agriculture, demands from energy development. And so there's this tension there that we need to kind of respect and be aware of. So it's just the right time to have a provincial water conversation. And we need to prepare for the future. So right now, I think we're doing well, but how can we improve for the future and look forward 10, 20, 30 years, 40, 50 years? So the topics that we discussed during the water conversation were these four here: healthy lakes, hydraulic fracturing and water, drinking water and wastewater systems, and water management. And what we did was, if you can picture a room, big room like this, we'd divide kind of into four, and all the participants would go to one table and have a conversation about that particular topic, so lakes here. And then after half an hour, they moved to a different table. Throughout the whole evening, they would have an opportunity to voice their opinions about all of these topic areas. We did provide kind of background information, talked about what the major issues were for those topic areas, and then let the conversation flow. So it wasn't, it was very unstructured in a way. So from an integrated policy perspective, some of the major things that we heard out of the water conversation are these. So I'll walk through them one by one here. So a clear theme that we heard was that watershed-based planning was important. So don't look at things just as by one facility by facility or by municipality, but really look at it from a watershed perspective, because that seems to make sense. That's how we would develop policies and plan for the future. And this requires a clarity of governance. So who is in charge of the watershed? There are multiple players there. This watershed approach is important for optimization too, and when I say optimization, meaning like the flows, demand and supply. So if you're just looking at it just from one person perspective or one party perspective, it's hard to optimize. Everyone kind of just wants their own. From a watershed perspective, encourages that sharing and understanding what you may have, what your neighbor may have, and seeing what's the best way to optimize the whole system. And healthy lakes, when we discuss that, it's not in isolation, it's really part of the whole watershed as well. Source water protection also became a theme that popped up in many of the conversations, whether it be from the drinking water topic area, whether it be from the water management area. or the lakes area as well. But really it was people wanting their source water, their drinking water, to be safe. And then, of course, that can't be in isolation. It's really integrated. So if we're doing it at the source and protecting that, that really helps the whole watershed. And ecosystem-based flow or environmental flow, that was another one that came up as well. So ensuring that the quantity, the timing, the quality of the water that flows is the right amount and quality for freshwater ecosystems and our human livelihoods. And when people talked about that, they said, you know, you must consider all components of it, consider social, the economic, and the environment as well, and make sure it's science-based, is what we heard. In the play-based approach, as it relates to hydraulic fracturing, that was discussed in the hydraulic fracturing topic area, and that also really resonated with people as well. So again, it's not facility by facility, but you know, working together in a geographic area to come up with ways to ultimately reduce the footprint in that area. So perhaps that could mean, you know, sharing infrastructure, sharing water resources, or what have you. And people seem to kind of that made sense for people. The optimization of the system, again, this concept of optimizing the supply and the demand of the water. You know, people said, let's look at both sides. So from a demand side, what are some ways to promote reuse and recycling? And also, what are ways that we can store that water if we're in times of increased water? So through storage or some other ways as well. And water conservation, too, was something that resonated with people throughout all of the topic areas. So there are many voluntary, major water use voluntary plans that are out there already. So what are the next steps that we can take to take that further and incorporate water conservation into our water ethic? And I think it's already there, but kind of how do we build it into the system even more? And when we talked about water transfers, people talked about, of course, water transfers in the south, because that is, you know, the only part of the province where the basin is closed. So there's a lot of knowledge there. So we need to think about how we transfer that knowledge to a broader provincial system as well, while respecting the intent of the transfer system. So it's not about you know, people with the deepest pockets benefiting from the water. It's the transfer system was built for when if a user was able to conserve water, then they are able to share that water with another user who may not have that opportunity to have the water. So it's kind of respecting that intent of the transfer system, and also supporting municipal growth as well. In terms of that regional planning component here, water, we look at it from a provincial perspective, and I spoke about a lot of the themes from a provincial perspective, but oftentimes we know that within the whole province, it's different from the north to the south. So we've broken up the province into 7 different regional areas through the land use framework. And right now, through the Lower Athabasca Regional Plan that's been developed for some time now, where from a water perspective, we are finalizing a number of things. So groundwater quality frameworks, quantity frameworks, and the surface water quantity framework as well, and as well as tailings management framework. The South Saskatchewan Regional Plan, that's in consultation right now, and from a water perspective, again, it's water quality framework is included into that framework. And from a quantity perspective, we're considering ways how the water conversation themes and topics that were discussed, how does that get incorporated from a regional perspective? That's something we're trying to tackle. And the North Saskatchewan Regional Plan, NSRP, that's the next one that's coming out, and we're in the process of drafting up the terms of reference now, but I think the water quality portion of it will be included in that. And because hydraulic fracturing, water quality, water quantity, in situ and saline, those topics are ones that are really going to be part of the upcoming regional plans that are going to be emerging. Water will be a strong component of these regional plans. And of course, this regional collaboration for ultimate use of drinking water and wastewater is important as well. So from a regulatory enhancement and water perspective, I won't talk too much about this because I know we have someone from the Alberta Energy Regulator here. But when we talked about it in the water conversation, tested a couple things with baseline water well testing and water conservation and the use of fresh water. So those things resonate with people, so don't use fresh water if you can, reduce that as much as possible. And baseline water well testing, much like we do with coal bed methane, that really made sense for people that we should do that for hydraulic fracturing as well. So we'll continue on here. And then the last one is provincial monitoring and water. Throughout all the topic areas of the water conversation, monitoring came up. And I think it came up mostly in lakes and also in hydraulic fracturing. So in making sure that we have the right systems in place to ensure and assure people that, that the water is safe and clean. And ultimately, it's about this base knowledge and understanding of what is out there. So people kind of tied monitoring with evaluation reporting and also information access as well. So we want that general support for that knowledge base of what is out there. So whether you call it information, education, awareness, it's just really a craving for the truth. And people kind of describe that through monitoring. And Aboriginal engagement, just wanted to mention this because engagement is part of that whole system. So we talked with Albertans across the province, whoever wanted to come to a session. We talked with stakeholders as well, had separate sessions there, and also had separate First Nation and Métis sessions. And we met with Treaty 6, Treaty 7, Treaty 8, and Métis organizations because the conversations were quite different because of their closeness with the land, their water, traditional uses. So, and all of that will be included into how we develop policies into the future. So for the long-term direction for these 4 topic areas, I talked a lot about the themes that we heard. The long-term direction or vision that we have for each of the 4 topic areas are listed here. And it'll take a few years to get there, but there are going to be early actions that we take in order to take us to these ultimate directions or visions, and you will see that shortly. We're hoping that the report and the actions will be coming out pretty quickly here. So the next steps for the water conversation, we have taken all that feedback from all those sessions, online feedback, letters, anything that was sent into the department. We've incorporated them into a draft report. We've taken the themes, some of what I've shown you here and more, because this is usually like a 2-hour session. We've gone through a validation phase with many stakeholders to say, is this what you heard during the conversation? And now we're in the process of kind of putting all that feedback from that validation phase to revise the report. We're in the process of seeking approval for the report and the actions that we would like to take as a direct result of what we've heard of the themes. And that'll come in the fall or winter time. And all the actions that kind of hinted towards and shown for the long-term vision, those will all kind of play out in different time scales. Some will be very quick. We'll be able to do them pretty quickly because we have the resources and the probably political will for it. And some will take a little bit longer just because maybe we might not have the right information yet, and a little bit more research has to be done. So they'll all play out in different scales. So it won't be this one package that will come out in the next month or so, but you will definitely see some things shortly. So that wraps up my time. Is that right? Is that good enough for timing? Yeah? Okay. Thank you very much.